Get ready for Tennessee's next game on the hardwood with our Vols matchup breakdown. We preview the Vols opponent and give you Tennessee's keys to victory here on Vol Basketball Fever. Hello everyone, thank you all for tuning in to another Vol basketball matchup breakdown video here on Vol Basketball Fever. I am Nathanael Rutherford. I want to say thank you all again and give this video a like while you're here, and please subscribe to the channel. We're here for another video talking about Tennessee men's basketball and who they're about to play next on the hardwood. Thank you all so much for tuning in. The Vols are going to take on the Missouri Tigers. But like I said here, please subscribe to the channel. We would appreciate that a ton. You guys have already helped this channel grow quite a bit here in the early infancy of the program and of the channel here too. So thank you all so much. We also have a podcast. You want to check it out. It's Vol Basketball Fever and Lady Vol Basketball Fever on this YouTube channel as well, and everywhere you get podcasts. That's Apple Podcast, Google, Spotify, you name it, we're there. Subscribe to us there as well. You can find all the links to those in the description down below, so please check it out. And again, subscribe to this channel while you're here as well. But as I said, Tennessee is getting ready to take on Missouri. The Tigers are coming to this one a bit on a different trajectory than Tennessee. The Vols, yes, are coming off a loss, but it was a competitive loss to Arkansas on the road in one of the toughest environments to play in the SEC. And Vols, while the offense did not look very good at all in that game, they also were not helped by some poor officiating. Arkansas also has a really good defense. Got to give them credit. But Tennessee coming off a loss, most likely not going to lose again, for one, because of the opponent. But for two, Tennessee has not actually lost 2 games in a row all year. I'm going to cross my fingers, do all different stuff to try to ward off any jinxes there that I may have just done. But Tennessee has not lost back-to-back games at all this season. So coming off this loss and playing a Missouri squad that has a losing record and has not been very good, especially in SEC play, you got to like Tennessee's chances. Missouri, meanwhile, does come into this game on a losing streak, having lost 3 straight, and they're getting ready to play their 4th game in 8 days, kind of basically a 4th game in a week. They lost to Arkansas at home on this past Tuesday on the 15th. Then they played Mississippi State on Friday on the road and lost to them. And then they played Mississippi State again on Sunday and lost 58-56. Wondering why were there so many games? One of those games against Mississippi State was a rescheduling because of, not because of COVID, but because of Missouri had some really bad weather not too long ago. I think it was sometime in late January, maybe even early February. But it was a rescheduling of one of those games. So that's why they played State twice in a matter of a couple days there. So this is going to be Missouri's 4th game in 8 days. They've lost all 3 of the last games they've played in the last week. This one probably going to go the same way. But again, don't want to count our chickens before they're hatched. But Tennessee playing a lot better over the last month. Missouri not playing well. A little bit here about Missouri. They are just not good at all. They've been wildly inconsistent with some shocking and impressive wins, but with also just a bunch of bad losses in terms of blowouts and a couple of bad ones on like the actual resume for this team as well. They got a surprising win against SMU in overtime back in November. And of course they beat Alabama at home in early January as well. So those 2 wins are, really good. I think both quad 1 victories, because I think SMU is a neutral site. So that was kind of shocking. But they also have losses to Kansas City, Liberty, and Florida State. None of those teams are very good. Along with 10 SEC losses, a lot of those have been blowouts. Missouri this season is also just 1-7 against teams ranked in the top 25 of KenPom, which is where Tennessee is. They're, I think, 12th as of the recording of this video. So 1-7 against top 25 KenPom teams, with the only win coming against Alabama. Again, an inexplicable victory against Alabama. I still don't know how that happened for Missouri. And they put up 92 points in that game. So also not sure how that happened. Mizzou Arena, where the Tigers play their home basketball games, hasn't been really friendly confines for the Tigers this year. They're just 7-7 at home all year, but just 2-5 at home in SEC play. So they're 2-5 at home, 2-5 on the road. So they've been just as bad at home as they have been on the road in SEC play, pretty much. Their only home wins in SEC play have been against Alabama and also against Ole Miss, with losses coming against Texas A&M, Auburn, Florida, Arkansas, and Mississippi State. So again, not very good at home. They're not very good on the road. The home court advantage is not going to be very strong, I would imagine, in this game especially too, but not been very strong for them all year. Conzo Martin, the head coach there, former Tennessee head coach too, feels like a dead man walking. I don't know if it'll be this year or next year because of the buyout he has in his contract, but just not a whole lot of excitement there in Columbia for these Tigers. And it's not just that Missouri's been bad just on offense or just on defense. It's not been just one side of the ball. They've been bad on both sides of the ball and at various times all season. Sometimes in the same game, they've been really bad on both sides of the ball. They're ranked just outside the top 120 in efficiency on KenPom in both offense and defense. And in looking at KenPom even further on an SEC play, Missouri is currently 12th in offensive efficiency and 13th in defensive efficiency in SEC play. So Georgia is the only team with a worse defensive efficiency, and them, and I forget who the other team was, are the only two teams that are worse than Missouri, has been an offense in SEC play. Mizzou has scored fewer than 60 points in 11 games they've played this season. 11 of the 27 games they've played, 6 of those have come in SEC play. They've also allowed 75 or more points in 11 games. Also, 5 of those in SEC play. So they have scored fewer than 60 11 times, and they've also allowed 75 or more 11 times. So, I mean, that's just like they don't score a lot, and they can often go under 60. But then they also have a bad propensity to give up a good chunk of points, too. So, again, they just haven't been good offensively or defensively this year. They've had spurts with a random game here or there where they've actually been good on one of those fronts, especially on offense at times, but more often than not, they've been mediocre to bad on both those fronts. Looking offensively, Missouri ranks in the bottom half of league play in 3-point percentage, 2-point percentage, rebounding, turnovers per game, and assists per game, while ranking dead last in league play in points per game at just 64 points per game against SEC opponents. They also run at one of the slowest paces in the entire country, and especially in the SEC, as Florida is the only team that ranks just slightly behind them in possessions per game, according to KenPom. Every other SEC team is, I guess, faster than Missouri, but Missouri has the second slowest pace, or tempo, I guess, in SEC, with Florida being the only one that runs a little bit slower of a pace than Missouri. So not only are they inefficient on offense, they also don't get many shots, so that's not helping them. They don't run a lot very efficient offense, and they also aren't getting up enough shots to really put up points on the board either. They average just under 55 attempts per game in SEC play, which is the 5th fewest field goal attempts per game in the conference. They also attempt just 17.5 threes per game, which is the 3rd fewest. They rank in like the 320s in percentage of points coming from made 3-pointers this year. So again, they don't attempt a lot of threes. They don't make a lot of the threes they also attempt, and they just don't run their offense, out in the perimeter a whole lot. They do have a couple guys who can make some threes, but again, they don't shoot a lot of them. They're a lot more post-oriented and kind of mid-range oriented, which that's kind of par for the course for a Conzo Martin team. If Vol fans remember, his strengths at Tennessee, and it's kind of carried over to his time at Missouri as well. So what does Missouri do well on offense, you're asking? They make free throws. Actually, they're really, really good at making free throws. They're second in the conference in FCC play in free throw percentage, making almost 76%, 75.8 against league opponents this year. So really good at making free throws. They're also pretty decent at grabbing offensive boards. They rank 77th in the nation in offensive rebounding percentage this year. They haven't been as good in SEC play, but they've been kind of middle of the pack in offensive rebounding. So again, they can rebound okay off their missed shots, and they can make free throws. Unfortunately for Missouri, there's a lot of unfortunates for Missouri. They don't get to the free throw line very often, so they're good at making free throws. They just don't get there. They only average 13.9 a game, which is actually in SEC play, which is the fewest free throw attempts per game in SEC play this season. So basically 14 a game, and that's the lowest total, or I guess lowest attempts per game in conference play. If they do get to the free throw line, they usually have a better chance of winning too, which so you'd think that maybe they should be more aggressive and try to draw more fouls, as all 4 of their SEC wins this year have come when they've attempted 14 or more free throws. So in all 4 of their wins, they've had 14 or more free throws. Doesn't mean they're guaranteed to win if they get 14 or more, but that's a common denominator in all 4 of their SEC wins. If you look at their losses, though, they've attempted 12 or fewer free throws in 6 of the 10 losses. So in the majority of their losses in SEC play, they've had 12 or fewer free throw attempts. So again, they're not great, but if they get to the free throw line, they're upping their chances of winning games. And unfortunately for them, they just haven't done that a lot this year, even though they're a very good free throw shooting team. Offensively, you want to look at kind of the guys to zero in on. It's Kobe Brown and Javon Pickett are their two best offensive weapons, with Jerron Coleman also providing some points at the point guard spot for them as well. Pickett leads the team in scoring in SEC play at 12.4 a game, with Brown averaging 11.1 and also 7.2 rebounds, leading the team in rebounding. He also dishes out 2.6 assists per game as that 6'7" post player that he is. He's a pretty talented player, pretty good overall player. But Kobe Brown's been a consistently pretty solid post for Missouri, especially this year. Coleman puts up 10 points per game, 4-point rebounds per game, and 3.3 assists per game in SEC play. So he's a pretty big point guard. That's going to be an interesting matchup just from a physicality standpoint. He's about 6'4", 6'5" as a point guard. And Tennessee, of course, has smaller point guards with Kennedy Chandler and Sakai Ziegler. Is he able to do some more physical things there, or is he going to be caught off guard and Tennessee's going to be able to pick his pockets? He also averages over 2.5 turnovers per game in SEC play, so not the best assist to turnover ratio in SEC play for Coleman. I will say, though, he is also making 33.3% of his threes, so not bad there. Their most efficient three-point shooter is DeJuan Gordon, or I think it's DeJuan, maybe, Gordon, who is making 42.5% of his threes in SEC play. So Gordon and Coleman are kind of the two guys to watch out for on the perimeter. But again, Missouri doesn't really jack up a bunch of threes unless, maybe Kobe Brown gets in foul trouble or their post gets in trouble with fouls. Maybe they'll go more guard oriented, but typically they're going to try to score in the paint and in kind of that mid-range game rather than on their perimeter with threes. Basically, though, this year, as Kobe Brown goes, so does Missouri, typically. The Tigers this season are 5-1 when he puts up 20-plus points, and they're 10-5 when he scores in double figures. They have yet to win a game this season when he doesn't score at least 10 points. They are 0-12 when Kobe Brown fails to get to 10 points. So 10-5 when he scores in double figures, 0-12 when he doesn't do that. 9 of Missouri's 10 SEC losses this year have come when Brown has been held to under 10 points. So he's been held under 10 points, I guess, that makes 9 of the 14 games that Missouri's played in SEC play. Again, he's been a big reason why they've won. Also a big reason when he's not effective why they've lost. So limiting Brown kind of seems the biggest key. If you can limit Kobe Brown in this game, among other things, Tennessee, I think, has a really good shot of winning this one for a lot of reasons, but I think that's kind of the big one. If Brown doesn't get 10 points, Missouri literally has not won this season. That's kind of the big, I guess, focal point for me in this game is keeping Kobe Brown under that 10-point mark. Defensively, it's much the same for Mizzou as offensively. They're in the bottom half of SEC play in field goal percentage defense, three-point percentage defense, opponent free throws attempted, and points per game allowed. And they're dead last in league play in turnovers forced per game at just 11 per game. So they don't. That's the problem with their defense is they're not, I guess, an awful defensive team when you look at all things considered, but they don't force turnovers, and they just allow teams to put up shots, and they're not very disruptive, and that's been a huge issue for them all year. Because when they've gotten turnovers, they've actually been okay. When they've actually been able to force some turnovers, they're 7-7 when they have forced 12 or more in a game. So again, not great, but when you consider they're 10-17, 500 mark, not bad. So they're 7-7 when forcing 12 plus turnovers in a game, but they're just a paltry 3-10 when they don't reach that 12 turnover mark. So 11 or fewer, they are 3-10. I'm telling you, they're not very good. So 14 games, they have forced 12 or more, and 13 they have not. So it's, again, they're just kind of, they've been wildly inconsistent and just mostly mediocre, but also sometimes very bad. And very occasionally, very good. If you're Tennessee, you're hoping that you're not running into just for some reason, an on-fire Missouri team out of the blue, which has happened a couple of times this year. They lost to, that Alabama game came after a blowout loss to Kentucky, and then they beat Alabama, and then they go and get blown out by Arkansas. So it's just like they have really good performances sandwiched in between awful performances. So they come into this game with a 3-game losing streak. Hopefully, for Tennessee's sake, they continue that bad play and go on to lose the fourth one. But to go back to the defense here for Missouri, their turnover rate in SEC play is second to last. Only team that has a worse turnover rate on defense, I guess, in SEC play is the abysmal Georgia Bulldogs, who Tennessee will play here pretty soon too. So Tennessee, well, they do have to play Auburn and Arkansas again. They do get to play Georgia and Missouri here down the stretch as well, which is nice. That's hopefully for Tennessee at least 2 more SEC wins. To go back to Missouri on the defense, What do they do good? Just like offense. What do they do good? They guard the interior. The interior is Missouri's strength. They're not great on the perimeter defense. They're not great on perimeter offense, but interior-wise, they're not bad on either front. They have the 5th best 2-point percentage defense in SEC play, despite allowing the 12th most 2-point field goal attempts in league play. So they're giving up a lot of field goal attempts down in the paint and kind of in mid-range. But they're doing a pretty good job of making sure that those teams aren't making a ton of those buckets either. They also average just over 4 blocks per game in SEC play, which is in the top half of the conference. So again, I think Kobe Brown has a lot to do with that. I think he has a block or so per game. So again, interior isn't too bad. That's another thing with Collins and Martin. You come to expect that he's going to have maybe some undersized post guys or some guys that are, kind of bigger in the post and will do well. And that's been the case. Like, Kobe Brown is a really good post player, and he's been very good for Missouri this year. It's just, unfortunately, he's kind of it. I mean, just to be frank, he's kind of the only post player that's been doing a whole lot for them this year. They've had some pretty decent guards, but Missouri just doesn't have a great roster overall. This is definitely going to be the worst SEC team the Vols have faced so far this season. Missouri's average margin of defeat in SEC play is 15.1 points. 4 of their 10 losses have actually come by 3 points or less in the SEC. So they've had 4 losses that have come by 3 points or less and have been very close. In fact, the last game against Mississippi State was a 2-point loss. But they've also had 5 SEC losses of 17 or more points, including a disastrous 44-point loss to Arkansas back on January 12th, just days after beating Alabama by 6 points at home. That game, if I remember correctly, Arkansas wouldn't have even had to have scored a single point in the second half and still would have won that game. They won 87-43. I think Missouri had like 15 points in the first half, and I think Arkansas had like 44 or 45 in the first half. They literally could have not made a single field goal, not made a single free throw in the second half and still won that game because Missouri only put up 43. They lost 87-43, got doubled up, and lost by 44 points in that game. And again, they've also beaten Alabama. They've also beaten SMU. I mean, the team is really weird to figure out. Overall, they're not very good. They've had some bright moments, but none super lately, though, unfortunately for them. Again, they did almost beat Mississippi State, but State did just enough to win both those games. The one at Starkville was not close, but the one in Columbia was. Weirdly enough, to kind of transition to look at Tennessee a little bit here, if you remember, Missouri actually beat Tennessee the last time these two teams played. The Vols decimated Missouri and Columbia back on December 30th of 2020 by a score of 73-53, back when Missouri was at that time ranked number 12 in the country. And then Mizzou returned the favor with a 73-64 victory on January 23rd of 2021 in Knoxville. But aside from that last loss, the Vols have actually won 5 of the last 7 games against Missouri, and they're 8-4 against the Tigers since Missouri joined the SEC, I guess almost a decade ago at this point. UT has actually won 3 straight contests in Columbia, with all 3 of those wins coming by 10 or more points. So again, kind of goes back to the fact that Missouri has not been great at home this year. They haven't been great against Tennessee at home over the last couple seasons. Again, the Vols have won 3 straight by 10 or more points in Columbia. As for the Vols, they haven't had much trouble with teams like Missouri this season. Tennessee is 6-0 this season against teams ranked outside the top 130 on KenPom. As of the recording of this, Missouri is, I think, 140th, so, not very highly ranked. And this will be the Vols' first game against a team ranked outside the top 100 on KenPom since they played USC Upstate on December 14th. So it's been over 2 months since Tennessee has faced a team that is ranked in this area on KenPom. Ole Miss is close, though. I mean, in terms of being outside the top 100, they're currently ranked 99th. I think when they played Tennessee, they were maybe 100th, 101. I think South Carolina also may have been right around there. But essentially, though, even with them being hovering around 100, Missouri's 140th. So, I mean, that's still significantly different than being like 100, 101. Missouri is definitely going to be the worst team the Vols have faced in 2+ months at this point. Tennessee hasn't lost this season to a team ranked outside the top 120 offenses on KenPom, which I think Missouri is easily outside of that, nor have they lost to a team ranked outside the top 90 defenses, which Missouri is definitely not near the top 90 defenses in terms of efficiency on KenPom. So Tennessee has not lost to a bad team this year. I'm saying all of this with like knocking on wood with my rabbit's feet, but making sure I'm not jinxing this team, hopefully, for this game and not downplaying this game too much. Because again, Missouri has had moments of brilliance that I'm just thinking they had no right winning that game against Alabama, against SMU, because of looking at their losses to Kansas City, looking at some of the ways they've lost and how they've lost to Kentucky, to Arkansas, these blowout losses they've had to Mississippi State on the road on Friday. I have a hard time believing Tennessee will lose this game, but it's the SEC. It's Tennessee facing off against a former coach. It's Tennessee on the road. Anything could happen. Genuinely, anything can happen. I just don't expect this game to be a loss for Tennessee. To kind of wrap it up here, looking more at Tennessee, it would not be crazy to say that Zakai Ziegler has been the Vols' best and most consistent player over the last month. In fact, I would say he has been. Not just by even just watching the games, you could probably say that, but the stats back me up here. He's scored in double figures in 8 straight games and has scored in double digits in 10 of his last 12 contests that he's played. And over his last 8 games, he's averaging 13.5 points per game, 2.6 assists, 2.6 steals, and 2.1 rebounds, while also knocking down an just astronomical 55.9% of his threes. He's not just, attempting 1 or 2 per game. He's attempting 3, 4, sometimes 5 in a game, and he's knocking down over half of them over his last 8 games. And he's also making 90% of his free throws in that stretch. And again, he's also averaging like 3 or 4 free throw attempts per game. So he has been just a really, really good shooter for Tennessee from the perimeter and when he goes to the foul line. And again, he's been basically Tennessee's most consistent scorer and consistent option on offense over the last month. And he's been a really good defender. Again, he's averaging over 2.5 steals while also averaging 13.5 points. He's been a phenomenal player for Tennessee over the last month. And in those last 8 games where he's been that good, Tennessee is 6-2 with their only losses coming on the road to Texas and on the road against Arkansas, 2 top 20 teams by, I think, basically all metrics analytics systems that I've seen have them as a top 20 team. And I think both of them are close to being top 20, at least top 25 maybe on the net ranking as well. So again, Ziegler's been phenomenal. He's been a big reason why Tennessee's been able to play better recently. Just his emergence as a legit, I guess, kind of third option, I guess, maybe behind Vescovy and Chandler on offense and scoring and being a really good defender. He's the spark plug off the bench. He's not going to win 6th man of the year because you're looking at, I look at some of these other guys in the SEC who are, I remember who it was now. There's somebody, I think LSU, I think Tari Eason has not started a game for them, and he's averaging he's their leading scorer. I think he's going to win 6th man of the year. But if it were almost any other year, my vote would go to Ziegler because he's been a phenomenal bench player for Tennessee. Has been the spark off the bench for Tennessee over this last month. But that'll do it here for this video, this breakdown video for Tennessee's next game because, again, I could talk a little bit more, but I don't see a point. I genuinely think Tennessee's going to win this game and win by 10 or more points. I hope I'm not wrong on that. I hope Tennessee is able to win this one handily. They could use that right now, especially a road game. They haven't had too many kind of handily won games on the road, especially in SEC play. So I think it'd be nice for Tennessee to go out and get it won't be easy because it's Missouri and they're going to play tough. Carson Martin, coaches his team's tough, and it is a road game. But I expect Tennessee to win this game and go into the Saturday's game against Auburn, hopefully with some more renewed confidence. I don't know if their confidence really got shaken that much against Arkansas, but hopefully, a win always helps and makes you feel more confident about yourself. So thank you all so much for tuning in. Please give your thoughts down below in the comments. Like this video and subscribe to our channel while you're here. Go check out the podcast as well. We'll have one up later this week too. Thank you all so much. And this has been another Vol basketball matchup breakdown video.